Welcome to selfdiscoveryradio.com, where the orchard of wisdom is just ready for picking. We celebrate your why, the journey that you've taken that inspires someone else. We support your services, we support your story. Come and be our guest, become a host, be an author with us. Come and see what we've got. Our next show is...
Hi, and welcome to the Wellness Journey podcast series. It's wonderful to have you here today. And I'm really excited because we are at the very end of our midlife strategy for full life living. And one of the things I thought about when it came to the whole idea of midlife strategy is that through all the things we talked about, it is a process. It is a form of transformation. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk with someone who is an expert when it comes to the whole idea of transformation. We have with us today Nicole Jansen. And Nicole has a wonderful practice, a wonderful podcast, first of all, that talks all about the idea of transformation. Nicole is, for the last 30 years, has had the honor of coaching and training thousands of women and men to transform their lives and to achieve extraordinary results in business and in life in general. And in her view, there is nothing better than seeing people excel and live their best life, especially when they're elevating others at the same time. And I totally agree with that. She's a speaker, a coach, the host of Leaders of Transformation podcast, and her mission is to help facilitate the global transformation from isolation and competition to connection and co-creation. And I absolutely do agree with that. And Nicole, welcome to the Wellness Journey podcast series. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you, Linus. I'm glad to be here, and congratulations on your 61st birthday.
Yes. I'm still celebrating. I celebrate the whole month. Actually, I feel like I should celebrate the whole year.
I think you should. Well, you look amazing, and I want to look as good when I'm 50 as you look when you're 61.
Oh my God! You mean you're still a child? You still have milk on your breath, then? If that's what you're talking about.
Oh, come on. 46. I wouldn't consider having milk on my breath.
Well, you know what? Many years ago, when my cousin was about 9 years old and I was about 11, and we were telling him that he was really too young to be hanging with us at the time.
Yes.
And he said to me, Linus, it's not the age, it's the stage. And I have always remembered that. Yes, he's very evolved at that age, still is. And I've always remembered that because it really is about the stage you are in your life and not necessarily age. And I think our society focuses too much on that number and should really be focusing on the stage we are and the strategy we want to use to get to the next stage of whatever that is. Not necessarily the strategy to get to the next age, but the next stage of productivity, the next stage of positive and joyful experiences in our lives. How do we do that? And you are an expert when it comes to advising people and doing things and helping them to strategize and to leverage all the good things that are going on in their lives to be able to get them to the next point. How did you get interested in doing something like that?
Well, I think, and it's funny because when you were saying I'm an expert in transformation, I don't know if I'm an expert in it. I think it's just I've had a lot of experience with it. personal transformation, business transformation, life transformations, and then attracting people that were looking to go through transformation and wanted a guide and coach. And so that started for me very early on through my parents were very entrepreneurial. And so I saw them transform from one stage to another in their business career and also in their life together and so forth. And for me, it was just it's always about how do we grow, how do we evolve, how do we take it to the next step. And so in my mid-20s, I had thought that this was the path. I thought, okay, we have done all this work and here we are, and this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And, God had other plans. And long story short, I sat down one day and I was like, what am I going to do next? Because the past, the stage in life that I was at up until that point was ending or had ended. And it was like, what do I do now? I'm 26 years old and, my future is not what it appeared to be. And so I sat down and really asked myself, what do I love to do? What am I passionate about? what stirs my soul. And in the process of going through that journey, which was a number of years ago, 20 years ago, there wasn't as many books and conversations happening about, purpose and what are your strengths and so forth. But so I took myself through this journey that I had just kind of self-created. And that journey ended up leading me to discovering how much I love to help people play to their strengths, maximize their potential. And that led me down the path of training and then later into coaching as people were asking me to coach them. And I realized I've been doing this my whole life. This is what I'm about. And my core strength, which one of my core strengths is the maximizer gift, was something that I've been doing my whole entire life. And so this is just an evolution of that. And it actually brings up an interesting point, is that sometimes with our strengths as a child, you mentioned about that 9-year-old, right? And he's just so evolved, that there's something about him that was unique, that was different. And whether he was doing something at 9 or whether he's doing it at 59 or whatever, it's going to be the same gift that's being applied, but depending on the stage in life that we're at,
yes,
it's going to look different. That maximizer gift when I was 8 years old was reorganizing my room every 3 or 4 weeks, and thinking that's what I want to be, an interior decorator. And it wasn't the decorating, it was the sorting, it was the organizing, it was finding the optimal way of doing something. And as I later got into life and got into coaching and training, I realized I use that same gift now for helping people to reorder their lives, reorder their businesses, and even just their framework of how they see the world. And that's where the transformation comes from.
And that's really a wonderful idea in terms of leveraging your gifts, talents, and abilities. And I think what happens in midlife in particular is after you've done a lot, around 40, 45 or so, you begin to start thinking, okay, what else is there? Your children maybe are out of the infancy stage, hopefully, and maybe in school, some are in college. For those who are 50 and over, maybe they're out of college, maybe you have some empty nesters, but at some point after 40, you begin to think about, okay, what else do I want to do with my life? What else is there? Because there's got to be something more than this. For so long, you're playing so many roles, especially as women.
Yes.
And I talk to mostly women. We are playing so many different roles. We're daughters, we're wives, we're sisters, we're workers, we're neighbors, we're participants in our churches. We're all these different roles. And caregivers. I mean, that never really goes away. And after a while, we keep putting ourselves on the back burner because of time constraints. We're thinking. And then we finally decide, okay, what am I going to do? You reach back there to figure out what you're going to do, and you can't even find yourself. And I really do believe that as we age, we become a sum total of all of our experiences, good and bad. So
yes.
Then the job becomes, okay, what is my strategy going to be able to leverage those dreams and goals that I've always, or those strengths I have, and those dreams and goals I've always wanted to pursue. And I think sometimes when we get to midlife, we think, oh, well, it's just too late. I've done too much. I'm going to look silly quitting my job. I'm going to look silly getting out of this relationship. I'm going to look silly downsizing to a cottage instead of a mansion. All these things we think about. But I think lots of times it's just that one word of realizing that transformation and change is a part of life. And it can be a very positive experience.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because we have this misconception, certainly in the Western world, and I think in other parts of the world as well, where we're meant to retire, meant to wind down when we get into our 60s. Mm-hmm. And, that doesn't actually, that's never made sense to me. And my dad, who passed away at 73, was vibrant and, 18-year-olds, he could keep up with 18-year-olds, and his strength and his character and all this. And, he used to have this saying, he used to say, I'm not retired, I'm refired. And, he just looked at it and saying, hey, it's the next stage in his life. It's the next, season where maybe he's not the one, because there are seasons in life. There's maybe the earning years, and then there's the years where you have children and you're heavily involved in that. And then there's, the years like now, it's like, wow, I've got all this time. What am I going to do with, I've got the money and I've got freedom and time, hopefully, and I can do what the things I want to do. And so I remember Norman Vincent Peale, who said at 85, he set a 10-year plan, because he's always looking. It's like, why would I retire? Why would I start winding down? I don't know how long I'm going to live. And if all I've got is 5 years left, then I better make the most of it. Wow. It's not about lessening. It's not about waiting to die. I love my uncle. He's a member of the family. We have an interesting relationship, love-hate relationship over the years, that's a whole other story, but we get along really well now. But he and my dad were like two sides of the coin when I was young. And so very negative, and my dad was very positive. And now he's realized in his older age the impact of that on his relationships and so forth. And he's shifted his view. He's now 80 and he's healthy and vibrant. And it's interesting is though still there's a little bit of that lingering, pessimism. Mm-hmm. And he says, he's basically saying, I've lived a good life and, I'm just here waiting, I don't know how long I'll be here, but he's just kind of basically waiting to pack up and go home. Mm-hmm. And I keep saying to him, you may live another 20 years, right. 15, 20, 25, you don't know, he's a vegetarian and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that the power of our mind really does play a role in all of this. Yes. And so it's how we see it. If we subscribe to what the culture says is, you're retired, you're washed up, you've lived a good life, and now it's a matter of going out to pasture, well then, you're going to miss out on some of those greatest years. I remember telling my parents when they were getting into their 60s and they had lost a business and everything fell apart and they were starting over again in their 60s, is saying, you know what, you have all of this experience, this life experience, and you're now it's like the wise sage, you're like, now you have so much richness. I love listening to people that are much more older than me because of all the things that I can learn from them. So if somebody's listening and they're in their 60s or 70s or 80s or whatever, even 40s, my gosh, people tell me, oh, I'm getting old, I'm 40. And like, are you kidding me? You're just getting started. In fact, the Bible talks about, in the early Old Testament, talks about people living to 800 years old and so forth. So, it's really our perception of, and what we believe to be true, is what we will create. So I look at you, you're so vibrant, but that's because you believe that and yes. you're choosing that.
Yes. And I believe that what we think about, what we ponder on, those things that we need to, that we, say in our minds, our self-talk and all of that can truly come to pass, either positively or negatively.
Yes.
I have learned to really cancel my negative thoughts. I mean, I literally cancel them. And it's not that I don't have them, because I do.
Well, we all do.
I stop and I'll say out loud sometimes, cancel. No, I'm not receiving that. And yes. I believe that when you begin to surround yourself with like minds, people who are positive, people who support your dreams and visions, people who themselves are pursuing dreams and visions, yes. At a stage of life that's similar to yours. When you surround yourself with like minds, then you find yourself even being further down that journey of accomplishing those things that maybe you've put off in the past that you want to pursue now. When I say that I believe that it's never too late, I really do believe that, because I started at 51 doing what I'm doing now and didn't have a clue as to what it was I was going to do or how I was going to do it. All I knew was that I needed to make a change for my health. I was in a very stressed out kind of position. I was suffering from an anxiety disorder. And initially I started out with the idea of finding out what I could do holistically to get rid of my anxiety. And when I started learning about things about anxiety and how to manage it without dropping a pharmaceutical, that's when I began to be really intrigued by this whole mind, body, spirit movement and how it plays such a major role taking care of our mind, our body, and our spirit when it comes to being well, not just well in your body, but being well overall. And if you are addressing those things in the continuum, then you're well along your way in terms of being able to pursue the other things in your life that are important. Because without that wellness goal as part of your dreams and visions, it's going to be difficult to kind of move
Yes.
forward. When you're working with people that are trying to make that change or that transition, what kinds of things do you talk with them about? What kind of things do you say they need to be focusing on in order to implement those strategies of change and transformation?
Great question. So I actually, funny enough, have a lot of clients who have been more mature in their 70s and their 60s. And right now I've been working with a gentleman who's in his early 50s, and he keeps telling me, I'm 52, like I'm running out of time. And I'm going, oh my gosh. But it's real for him, right? And it is real. There is something that I used to say, even when I was in my 20s, coming back to your being 11 and looking and saying, you're not old enough to,
Right,
you're
right.
not cool enough. However old we are, is the oldest we've ever been. So when people say, oh, Nicole, you're young, I'm like, well, this is the oldest I've ever been. So to me, everybody has that same experience of feeling the oldest that we've ever been. So in this case, even at 52, which is young, right? You look at it and go, oh, you're still a baby.
Right.
It's the oldest he's ever been. So he looks at it and sees it from that perspective. And so what I talk about is changing your focus. I love what Tony Robbins talks about: change your focus, change your state, change your words. And our focus so I actually took that triad that he teaches and I applied it to, the affirmations. Where does affirmations fit into that? That's in our words. How do we change our words? Is the things we say to ourselves and the things that we think to ourselves, right? Like you said about canceling. I do that. I just like, stop. No, I'm not taking that thought on.
Right.
It came in.
Right.
Doesn't mean I need to keep it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I have a choice what I'm going to do with that thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then with gratitude, where does gratitude fit in? It's in the focus. What do we focus on? So, and state is getting exercise, moving around, focusing on things that you mentioned about association, being around people that are positive, like-minded, moving forward. And so when you look at changing your words, changing your focus, change your state, those are the things I talk about with clients in any situation, because wherever we are is because of the things that we've thought, the things that we've said, the things that we have done and or not done, right? And it's the environment that we're in. So it's looking at that and saying, okay, where do you choose to be? Where do you desire to be? And how do we get you from where you are to where you want to be? We change your words, change your focus, change your state. And so with the other piece with this, to go more drilling deeper into, you mentioned about anxiety. Yes. And having an anxiety disorder. A lot of times we look at these things in our life, and I joked about having known a lot about transformation because I've gone through it a lot. And a lot of that is that's a polite way or nice way of saying I've been through a lot of challenges in my life, right? And so, which have allowed those transformations to happen. Well, those things, those challenges, those deepest, painful experiences are often the thing that is the clue to our purpose in the next stage of our life. And so, again, those strengths that we had when we were a child will evolve in the way that we apply them, like I was describing about the maximizing gift. But overlaid on top of that now, as you have, like you said, all of your life experience makes up who you are. And so you look at those life experiences and the passions that have developed out of that, and now you see and saying, wow, you know what? You're a wellness specialist, expert, right? A woman that teaches about wellness, health and wellness, coming from a place of, where did you discover that? You discovered that
experiences
through your challenging experience of having anxiety. And so if you hadn't had anxiety, you might not have ever discovered that, right? So that's where, in order for us to see the light, we have to sometimes experience the darkness, right?
Yes, I truly do believe that also. And as I've said before, there's a lot of value in the valley.
Oh, yes.
You're in that valley of despair and going through changes and, looking at those obstacles and challenges that are before you, and you just feel like you're not going to make it. There's value in that.
Yes.
It's difficult sometimes, especially when we're young, to look at it that way. But as we begin to get older, you begin to recognize when you're in a valley moment and that there's some value here, even if the value is mean that you're just stopping and doing nothing. And I really do believe when it comes to a whole idea of implementing a midlife strategy is also putting in your strategy that there are going to be times when you're not going to do anything, where you just need to stop and be still and listen. Really listen, because we are a society that's so full of distractions. There's so many things out there that are in our communication system, all that noise. And many times we block the very voice that we need to hear to get us to the next point. As we age and mature, the hope is that you have learned, how to be quiet, how to listen to that voice. And then the challenge is, I think, always for the rest of our lives to act on that voice, because you might hear the voice, but you're like, yeah, but that doesn't fit what I want to do, or that doesn't fit what, my expectation is. But if you really think about it, many times that voice will tell you to do something that is outside your comfort zone. That's how you stretch. That's how you get to the next level of what you're trying to get into. And when you're working with patients, how do you help them to learn how to trust themselves more and trust that voice?
Well, coming back to, you mentioned about when you get to a certain age or you get older, hopefully you've learned that. I've met 20-year-olds who have gotten to that point where they can hear that voice. And I've met 60-year-olds that haven't yet done it. Again, it's like what you talked about. It's stage of life, and I think there's an important lesson here in terms of, and there's been a lesson that I've learned through the challenge, through struggle, is to let go of the resistance and allow the flow of life, allow things to happen. Sometimes we resist, like you said, this isn't the way I want it, right? We look at our life, and a lot of times what happens is people look at, especially you get to midlife, you look at it and you look back and you say, this isn't what I expected. This isn't where I was supposed to be. And I think one of the biggest things that's important is to let go of the should, what it was supposed to look like, and embrace what is. And in the process of experiencing and saying, okay, this is what is, and loving and being grateful for what is, then you can open up the space and the noise of the shoulds and the expectations and the what do people think, and all that stuff can be released, and you can actually sit and be quiet enough to say, okay, this is what is. I'm grateful for what has happened, all the things in my past. Can you get to the point where you're grateful for it? Doesn't mean you ever want to repeat it again. There's a lot of things in my life I was like, I learned the lesson, don't want to go back there again, thank you. But
it is interesting, because it really is about deciding to make that choice.
It is a choice.
Yes, and
it is.
And I think that we have to realize that many of the things that we do, many of the situations and everything that we get ourselves into are based upon choices that we've made. So why not go ahead and choose joy in your life, choose to be happy in your life, choose to feel fulfilled in your life. You can really choose that. And you can also prophetically claim that it's already happening. Many of the things that we want to do in our lives, that we want to implement, that we want to roll out, it may not have happened yet, but you can begin to act as if it has.
Well, and the interesting thing is a lot of it is right around us already. We just don't see it, right? Because we are so into what should have been, into the resistance of life versus the flow of life, that we don't actually see. How often do we hear that somebody just made a decision and said, this is what I'm going to choose in my life, and all of a sudden I want to get healthy, I want to get vibrant. Oh, I didn't realize, down the street there's a yoga studio. This is, all of the things that have been around them, all the resources, the abundance,
awareness is raised.
Yes, is all around you already. And so when we're like, God, why are you not doing this? Every time I've done it, it's like, God, why are you not doing this? And I realize it's all around us all the time. But one of the things, like you said, it's choice. One of the things I do with my clients is help them to get back to realize actually that they're in the driver's seats. I kind of joke with it, and I say, slide from the passenger seat. You feel like life is happening to you, right? Or has happened to you, right? Slide back over the driver's seat in your mind and realize that you are choosing everything. You are in control. You're in the driver's seat of your life. Yes, there is destiny and there's God's calling and all that, but you're still there's free will, right? You are in the driver's seat. So if you're in the driver's seat, where do you choose to go?
Right.
And if you're not where you like to be, like if you're in Florida and you say, I hate muggy weather, okay, get in your car, get on the plane, right? Go somewhere different. It's funny because how many times people complain about where they live or complain about their situation. It's like, well, you may not like me for saying this, but you chose that. It was the series, the decisions that you made that actually led you to be there. And it's the same thing in my life too. When I looked at my life and said, wow, I don't like certain things about my life, but then I had to be real. I had to take, this is where responsibility comes in and saying, you know what? I chose those things. It was the series, and not from a judgment, not from a criticism, blaming, shaming position. It's looking at it and saying, this is so beautiful. You're in the driver's seat. So, you can actually change this next season of your life. What do you want to do? It was interesting. My husband and I were talking about this morning is, he was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, and Gary was saying, what are you waiting for? Whose permission are you waiting for to live the life that you choose? He's like, one day you're going to die. Nobody gets out of this life alive.
Right.
Everybody's going to die. So what are you waiting for? And it was so true. We were talking about it, and I said, it's so true, because as people age and they get older in their life, and they see their life is getting, what do they have left is getting shorter, and they a lot of times that's where people realize and saying, what was I worried about? I was so worried about everybody thinks. Everybody's worried about their own life. Come on, do what you want to do.
And I think sometimes there's that fear quotient, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm not successful? What if I look stupid? All that kind of stuff. And I like to quote Joyce Myers. She basically says, do it with fear anyway. Do it anyway. Yeah. Many times the things that I have been afraid of, when I finally did it, it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be. Every conversation I've been afraid to do, every new process I needed to learn or whatever, when I got to the other side of it, I'm like, wow, that wasn't that bad. In fact, kind of like a roller coaster. Let's do it again, But that was just getting there. But there was something else that I've learned over the years that I truly do believe. If you have this dream or this goal that you want to pursue, and you're not quite sure how to get there, or even if you have the skill set, I believe that everything that you need, everything, every tool, every nuance that you need to be able to do that thing that you really want to pursue, you already have within you.
Yes.
You've just got to change the talk. You got to change the lies that you tell yourself in terms of what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, God doesn't give you a gift or a dream in your heart, a purpose, without giving you the tools. Now, He's going to help you, right? But giving you the tools and the abilities within you. They may be buried. You may not see them.
Right.
But how often do we hear that? A story of, people that at late age, Colonel Sanders, 67 years old, started. Where'd that come from? Absolutely. Business mogul. Come on, right?
Louise Hayes.
Yeah.
I remember reading once about her. She was saying, like, she was in her late 50s or something like that. She was writing bad checks. She had no money.
Yeah.
In her late 50s. And look what the huge publishing empire she created, and lived well into her 80s, I believe. Publishing books and inspiring people and all of that. But she was in her late 50s and feeling like a failure then. And look what she built. And look at the legacy that she left. And I believe sometimes when you are older and deciding to make a change, you bring with you, as you mentioned before, that whole experience. So there's going to be some changes that you're not going to go through, that you might have gone through when you were on what I like to call the hair on fire 20s and 30s. And I say that because I've got 4 daughters. They're all in their late 20s, early 30s. And usually their hair is on fire once a day about something that I'm thinking, oh, this is nothing. But, to them it is, because they don't have the breadth and depth of experience to know that this is not that big of a deal. This too shall pass. You'll get to the other side of it, look back at it and say, okay, that's my aha moment, or that's what I learned from that. But, their age-appropriate response to things that are going on they've never experienced before. You get to the other side of that, 40s, 50s, and 60s, you're like, okay, I see what that is. I recognize it. I may not have gone through this particular thing before, but I'm going to leverage whatever learning is there with the knowledge that nothing lasts forever and that this too shall pass.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of, I think back to the Bible and Moses, he was 80 years old when God called him, right? Joshua, these were not young men. These were not 20s and 30s, 40s, and even 60s when they went on to do some of their greatest accomplishments. And so it's reframing it and saying, yes, you have all of this life experience, all this perspective, and now what are you going to do with it?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
But that voice, you mentioned about that quieting voice and the noise that's out there, I think that's really, talk about focus. You change your focus. Most people, in order to embrace something new and exciting for their life, they have to quiet the voice and the noise to be able to hear, like you said, that still small voice inside that guides you. And, with the social media and the phone, we wake up and the first thing we do is we grab our phone, and some people do, and check all that. Like literally, you gotta cut all that out. It's valuable. It's wonderful. It's a great way to market yourself. And, I know you were sharing with me that you didn't even know how to do that. And, 15 years ago, you learned it all. My dad didn't touch a computer until it was 1999. And, and he but he figured it out, and he embraced it and loved connecting with people that way. It's a wonderful tool, but taken to the extreme. And this actually goes for any strength. Any strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness. It's an excess. It's like good food. Good food in moderation is wonderful. Too much of it becomes no longer good anymore, right? It's no longer healthy anymore. And it's the same thing with technology. Technology is wonderful when we use it appropriately. When we use it excessively, then it causes us to never have that quiet time, to never have the peace inside. So we're constantly grabbing and looking at what's happening here and who's doing this, and comparing ourselves to others. And I think for myself, when I had to, look at my life, and I've done that many times, where I reevaluate, I actually do it on a regular basis where I'm constantly reevaluating, but those major shifts in my life is I had to turn off all of that noise, because I didn't want my decisions to be influenced by what everybody else was doing. Right. I wanted it to be, what does my inner truth and my inner spirit know? What does God say about who I am? Right? And that God even with who lives within me, right? What does he say? What are my desires? What's my passion? As opposed to seeing other people and saying, oh, maybe I should do that. And, oh, maybe I should do this. And, oh, maybe I should do that. And all these external, viewpoints. Right. And so getting quiet, going, and we've talked about this. It's like getting some time at the beach or in nature or somewhere there's just silence. Yeah. Turn off the TV, turn off the phone, turn off the, whatever the technology of choice is. And even the kids, I love, children are wonderful, family's wonderful, friends is wonderful. But you got to go and you got to answer those questions. Just you, because, I do believe, actually, I was talking to someone years ago and they were saying, yeah, but my husband's not doing this and blah, 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 blah. And they were pointing to other people, right. They haven't done, right? And a lot of times women, I find that they're like, my husband hasn't done this and I'm waiting for him, and we're supposed to be doing this together. Well, I don't know where this came from. I think this was inspired thought, because it's certainly that I was in my early 20s. I don't know where it was beyond my wisdom at the time. But I said, you know what? At some point, you're going to stand before God, and he's going to ask you, and he's going to say, what did you do? I believe, this is my opinion, what did you do with the gifts that I gave you? And what are you going to say? Yeah, but he didn't and she did. And he's going to say, I didn't ask you about them. I asked you about you. Mm-hmm. What did you do with the gifts that I gave you, that you were called to share with this world? How did you do that? And that always stuck with me. Even as I was sharing with someone else, it stuck with me to go, yeah, good question, Nicole. What are you doing with the gifts that he gave, you?
And at midlife, it is a great opportunity to kind of stop and take stock of where you've been and where you want to go. and being quiet is part of it. But there are some other tools and things that you can use to help you get some of that out. And we talked about this before, and that's journaling. How important is journaling when it comes to figuring out what you want to do next when it comes to implementing your strategy?
Yes, well, I'm a big fan of journaling. In fact, I'm sure there may be a couple, but most successful people, I would say almost every successful person journals, and they get their thoughts out of their head because it's rolling around in our head. And when we journal it, it becomes a physical thing. There's a number of reasons why journaling is valuable. Number one, it gets it out of our head, rolling around in there, and gets it clear on paper. Secondly, it helps us to see it. There's a visual aspect of it. And now I'm not just thinking about it, I'm actually seeing it on paper and how it looks. But it's, and even asking, I think, in not just journaling and saying, these are all the horrible things that happened to me, or here's all the things I screwed up, or however, our mind oftentimes runs. But it's actually asking ourselves quality questions. One of the questions I used to ask myself is, what have I done? When I was young, in my 20s, I would say, why is this not working for me? Or what am I doing wrong? Or what have I done wrong? What have I see all the things I've messed up? And it's like these unspoken questions. But when you actually put it in a journal, all of a sudden you look at that question, you realize that's not a very healthy question to ask myself. Because when I get the answer to that, what am I doing wrong? Then it's like a list. It's like a list of judgments, right? It's like, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong. Well, now you get to the end of that question. What have you got to work with, right? Now you feel worse about yourself. Whereas if you ask yourself, what am I not seeing about this situation? What do I desire to do? And I think a good question is, what pains me? What upsets me when I see, what breaks my heart? Right? When I think of passion. So I look at it as strengths, passion, and experience, and bringing those together, that's what I call the edge, right? My company, which I launched in 2005, was called Discover the Edge because it was that sweet spot. The edge can be many things, but in this case, it is the sweet spot. You can have the edge and also relating and understanding yourself and others better, building better relationships, more effective teams. In this case, so it does start with you understanding yourself better. So looking at your strengths, looking at your passion. Your passion are those things that that drive you. It's like, what drives you? And even looking at your core values. And these are all things that if you journal, you can have this all rolling around in your head. But it's like fleeting. You have a thought, it disappears. You have another thought, it disappears. When you put it in a journal, now it's starting to take it from the metaphysical to the physical, and you can start to work with it.
Yes, and I have lots and lots of journals. I was just looking to see where my latest journal is. I have journals that I use for my prayer line and Bible study. I have journals that I use for my reflection, and journals that I use for gratitude and manifestation. And right now I've been focusing a lot on gratitude and manifestation, which means that while I am writing, in many places I am writing about what I'm grateful for. Sometimes prophetically grateful because it hasn't happened yet. I'm focusing on, also I have another journal, kind of like a dream journal. In my dreams, things come out, in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's kind of hard. It's dark. You're writing in the dark. You look at it the next day, like, what the heck was that? So I have a little flashlight. I don't wait for my husband. Get the, flashlight, shine it down and just write something real quick, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just a word or it's a phrase or something. And you know how when you wake up, they say when you wake up in the morning and you remember your dreams, you remember maybe the last one or two, but you may have had 8 or 9 dreams. If you begin to journal after you dream, you begin to train your thoughts in such a way that you remember more and more and more. And many times in your dream, it's the Holy Spirit or God or whatever you want to call it that's speaking to you. Yeah. Guiding and directing you. It happened to me. That's why I have a magazine. In the middle of the night, God woke me up and he said, I want you to do a magazine based upon your show, The Wellness Journey. And I'm like, what? I don't know anything about magazines, journaling, none of that stuff. What are you talking about? But his thing was, well, you didn't know anything about, being a broadcaster. You didn't know anything about wellness. You didn't know anything about social media. And look at you now. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so I did it. But it started with me waking up in the middle of the night, and he told me specifically, write a magazine. I wrote it down, and then went back to sleep. When I got up the next morning and I looked at it again, And I'm like, that's right, a magazine based upon the wellness journey. What's the first step? And it just came to me just like that. I could have easily not written it down and then maybe not even remembered parts of it, and then it's just there somewhere. But journaling helps to get those things out. And sometimes what you're thinking in terms of what it all means may come to mean something else as you began to write.
Yes.
You know, you went, wow, it actually leads you to another place. But it's a good beginning of a roadmap.
Yes.
To help you with.
Well, and that's actually how I came up with my podcast. I mean, I didn't come up with my podcast. Mm-hmm. It was a 4:30 in the morning, wake me up from a deep sleep. You're going to do a podcast. You're going to call it Leaders of Transformation. You're going to interview difference makers, world changers. Go. And I'm like, well, when am I going to do this? And he said, now. Yeah. Now. Okay. It was 4:30 in the morning. And yes, it's listening to that. It's listening to those inner promptings. A lot of times people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Well, first of all, stop saying I don't know what to do, because that, of course, is reinforcing and going to block, right? Because your subconscious mind is going to say, oh, okay, and I'm going to respond to that, and I'm not going to let you see what you need to do. But there's also just stopping and listening, because the answer is already there, as you said earlier. The answer is already there, and or it's just waiting on the surface. I think sometimes we just need to get quiet enough for God to say, oh, can you hear me now? Great. So with this podcast, so it was 4:30 in the morning, and I thought, now means now. Okay. So I was up, I was awake by then. And so I thought, okay, who can I call that knows about podcasting? So I called somebody in Atlantic, Canada, who was 4 hours ahead. It was 8:30 in the morning on Saturday morning, Mark Mawini. And Mark had been podcasting 7 days a week. And so he knew a thing or two about it. And I called him up and I said, do you have a few minutes? And literally it was like take action on those thoughts. There's a lesson there. It's like, take action on those thoughts. So I had a 15, 20-minute conversation. I didn't know anything about podcasting. And he told me, okay, you need this. This is a software. This is how you do the editing, blah, blah, blah. Go. Okay, go, right? And so within, I think it was 2 weeks, I was live with that podcast, which has now been almost 3 years ago.
Wow.
But it was a 4:30 in the morning wake up call. And so many times, I love that you said that about the flashlight, because I thought it was just me. I'm crazy. Mm-hmm. I got got the light on, quiet. I don't want to wake my husband up either. And it's just writing down. Sometimes I'll go into the living room and I'll start to write. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes it's 5 minutes, or maybe it's just a word. Sometimes it's an hour. But I think the reason why that happens to us in our evening time, and they do say that actually around 4:30 in the morning, there's like this quietness. A lot of the world is asleep, so there's a less noise out there. And so that's where sometimes we hear those things. But it's also because our brain has been processing throughout the night and clearing and digesting. And so then we have that space. Can you imagine if we had 24 hours of being able to hear that voice all day long, the insights, the growth, the progress that we could make if we were just to hear that more often? And that's where meditation comes in, and measuring and managing our social media and our, being on the phone and texting and talking and, even podcasting. Podcasting is wonderful. But, if all you do is have other people talking at you all day long, then you never have the opportunity to hear what you have to say and what God has to say to you from the inside out.
And something else just occurred to me in terms of beginning to make that transformation and beginning to implement your strategy. I think we need to also make sure that we continue to be kind to ourselves, or start being kind to ourselves and loving to ourselves, and not to get so obsessed with the change and transition that it becomes more of a detriment and a headache instead of joy.
Yes.
One way to do that is to monitor the amount of time you spend in your transition. When I first started this business, I was so passionate about it. I was doing it probably 15, 16 hours a day. And every time my kids would see me, and they were in high school, so they were gone all the time. Anyway, they didn't care. I was, at that time I had a computer credenza, and the computer was there, and I was in there with the two little doors there. I was in there like this all the time. Like, what are you doing? I was building a website. I was doing all this stuff. And by the time I got to my third or fourth year, I was beginning to feel as burned out as I was feeling when I left corporate America. I didn't have the anxiety, but I was losing my passion. I was beginning to implement things in the same way I was when I was working for someone else. And I had to remind myself, wait a minute, I don't have to start work at 6 o'clock every morning and work until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I can start at 10 or 9 or whatever. Now, I'm an early morning person, so I start very early. But I have learned to cut things off. And while I may have a huge list of things to do, okay, we talked about this once before, I have this list of things I have to do. And then at the end of my day, I draw arrows to the things that, I'm going to do the next day. Well,
Yes.
after a while, if those things I'm going to do the next day are on my list 2 and 3 days later, well, maybe they weren't that important. So I take them
Yes.
off rather than
Yes.
use those as things to make me stressed out because I haven't done it. Well, I haven't done it because that's not what the Creator has for me. That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And you want to maintain balance, especially at this stage in your life. Remember, the whole idea is making that transformation that's going to bring you joy. It's going to bring you a sense of fulfillment, not something that's going to stress you out and make you unhappy, upset, depressed, and beat up on yourself.
Yes.
So you can do it in increments. I believe you do 1 or 2 things towards whatever it is that you're working on, whatever your passion is, you do 1 or 2 things, whatever those things are, you're well on your way to accomplishing those tasks. And I don't think so much about, oh God, I don't have much time, like you're one of your clients. I think you have as much time as God needs you to have to do what it is that you're supposed to do.
Yes, and you can actually get more done in less time when when you take, what's the saying? If I was to cut down a tree, and if it takes 8 hours to cut down the tree, or what, I would take 6 hours to sharpen the axe, or if I had 8 hours to, it's like sharpen your axe.
Yeah.
It's so, and this is where we're shifting our focus from scarcity to abundance. If we were worried about we don't have enough time, what are we telling ourselves? There's just like this subconscious, record playing that I don't have enough time, I'm running out of time. Then we're scrambling. I don't know about you. I mean, I do work well under pressure, but if I get to that point where I'm like worried about I don't have enough time, I'm actually less effective and things take longer in that panic mode, because now I'm all uptight about it. I'm tense about it. But if I let it flow and I'm just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to focus on this. I've got 2 hours to get this done, or however much time I've got that I want to allocate to this. And I just then focus from an abundance standpoint of really just getting to it.
Yes.
And not having the tension, then I can get it done that much faster. And it's amazing. That's why some people say, it's amazing what I can accomplish in 2 hours. And yet there are other times when they don't accomplish anything in 2 hours. But what's the difference? It's their focus, and it's how they feel how they're approaching it.
Yes, I think it's so much not about the quantity necessarily, but the quality.
Yes.
I could spend 8 hours toiling over something, and then the next day spend 30 minutes. Is like, wow. It just happened to me the other day. I have been struggling on a couple of things I need to get done, and I had set everything up to do it, and then I just didn't feel like doing it. What I've learned with that, though, is to, if it's not filling, if I'm not in that zone, okay, fine. Leave it alone. Give it to the Creator for a while. Go and do something else. And then when I get that gumption, I come back, and then that whatever it was that was keeping me from doing it is gone, and it just comes out. But see, that's one of the benefits of the midlifer. You may have at this point, or you're in the process of carving out that time where if you want to leave something, you can come back to it later. You don't have the distractions of little kids running around perhaps, or a job that you're working all day, or a job you care about, or whatever. Things are changing. Your priorities are changing. So even if you do have children at home and you are working, at midlife, you're beginning to realize there's something else. And it's amazing how you will set aside time some way, somehow, for what you really want to do. And if you're not doing that, you need to start doing that and stop putting it off. And there's something that I do that helps me with procrastination when it comes to this. I listen to subliminal messaging in terms of stopping procrastination. And there's several of them on YouTube that helps with subliminal messaging for motivation, inspiration, procrastination, and any other weird habits that you might have. And that has really helped me out quite a bit. It's just helped me to not only focus, but it begins, if you read the list of affirmations that they have that's running in the background that you can't hear consciously, you look at it, you can see why over time, listening to that, it really does change your thought. And all of a sudden, you're doing the very thing that, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like doing that. And then over time, you don't even have to listen to that anymore. You kind of recognize the triggers. And there are triggers out there that can put you in that mode of procrastination. And you start looking for those triggers, and then you just avoid them. When you know you have to get something done, you avoid those triggers. And I also believe in doing things in increments. There's something called, what was it called? The Palmetto method or something like that. It's a method where you have a timer, and the timer's on for like 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, you let go of that task and you go to another task.
Right.
It's on your list instead of feeling like you have to, finish that right now. And incrementally, again, as you do things incrementally, it's amazing as you are incrementally implementing your strategy, how at the end of all that, you're like, wow, I got all that done. It didn't seem like it took that long because every day you're doing something towards it. I want to make sure, Nicole, that everybody knows about your podcast, where they can go to listen to it. I know you also have a gift for our listeners. So I just want to make sure we get that in because we're coming close to our end time. Sure.
So the Leaders of Transformation is the name of the podcast. It's on iTunes and Stitcher and all the different platforms. The website is leadersoftransformation.com. And the gift that I have for your listeners and viewers is called the 7 Keys to Maximizing Your Potential. And it's a 30-day guide that walks them through a short exercise each day, as well as there's a few questions for gratitude, because I do believe all my clients who have ever implemented a gratitude exercise, whether, like you said, grateful for what they do have and grateful being prophetic and what they know is coming, they've had profound results in doing that. So I highly encourage that. But outside of the gratitude each day, there are specific steps to help people identify who they are, what are their strengths, what's their passion, and to really live a life more abundantly. So that's a 30-day guide. They can get that at leadersoftransformation.com/7 keys, the number 7, KEYS.
Okay, fantastic. And for those of you who are on the show page, or go to our show page, and you'll be able to see the link that will take you directly to the site that will where you can download the information, and also a link to Nicole's podcast and her social media. You have a group also on Facebook of podcasters and other like minds that have joined. So just all kinds of ways to intersect with you. Nicole, thank you so much for being on the Wellness Journey podcast series. It's been wonderful to have you. And I just love your whole persona about how you help people with transformation and change. It's so important and so needed. And thank you so much for sharing some of those tricks and tools that you share with your clients.
Oh, thank you very much, Linus. I appreciate being here, and we're talking about wellness, and I would leave your listeners just one thing, an affirmation that I've said to myself that has really helped me through some difficult times is life flows through me with ease and grace. And I just have said that to myself over and over again. Life flows through me with ease and grace. So life flows through me with ease and grace.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much. What a beautiful way to end our podcast. And thank you to all of you who have taken the time to listen to the Wellness Journey podcast series. And I hope that you will go back and take a listen, if you haven't already, to some of the others in the series for the midlife strategy for full life living. I promise you those interviews are going to give you all kinds of ideas and aha moments on how you can live a more well and full life for your mind, your body, and your spirit. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Linus, and you've been listening to the Wellness Journey podcast series. We'll see you again next time.
For more wonderful shows like this, please go to selfdiscoveryradio.com, podcasts, and see our lineup. And if you wish to support us, we have a funded button. Please stay tuned for our next show.